here, so if you have a half a day extra, you don't know what to do, this is maybe an interesting destination. It's one of these postcards settings, and very interesting to visit. So here we are circling around the train station, and in front of us we have now Alfred Escher, a very important person for Zurich and for Switzerland as a whole in the 19th century, looking down the Bahnhofstrasse, the major shopping street, which interestingly was until a little bit more than 100 years back actually a little creek, the Frogs Creek, because when they built this train station they considered this far out in the woods, in the meadows, very far away from the center, what is still today the Paradeplatz, and only a little bit later they discovered it might be useful to have a street connecting the center of Zurich with the train station. And then they filled up the Bahnhofstrasse, and in the meantime it developed into the major shopping street of Zurich. So this wonderful supermarket Co-op here on the right side, it's a funny story. This is supposedly a temporary building since over 50 years. It was initially set up here next to the river as a backup for the Globus department store. That was the major building along the Bahnhofstrasse. So while they were renovating that, they used this here. And when they finished and moved back, then there was immediate agreement that this is very ugly, not very fancy, especially for visitors arriving from the train station. The first sight they see is this beautiful building. So it has to go away, to be taken down, exchanged, whatever. So that was agreed on immediately, but what the alternative could be, they are discussing since 50 or 60 years. Could be a museum, a park, a beer garden, a gallery, whatever. The ideas are plentiful, but so far, and in the meantime, the locals in Zurich are just appreciating the convenience of this centrally located supermarket that is open until 10 o'clock at night. So it has a practical use, even though it's not very beautiful. So here to the right you see this, there's a little cable car that is connecting here the central place with the technology university. So for the lazy students, when they come from So here to the right is the top station of this cable car I mentioned, and to the right is this observation terrace. We actually cannot really stop here very nicely, so it's a nice little sidewalk from downtown in the afternoon or in the evening. So here we're driving right between these two university buildings, the left the ETH, right the university, including the Natural History Museum here, and that is also very interesting, and one of the few things in Switzerland that's free of any charges to enter. So it's another option for a rainy day. So while we make this left turn on the right side, we have the main building of the University Hospital, very famous especially for its cardiac system. The first heart transplantation took place here just shortly after Bernard did the first one in Cape Town. And well, if you don't know whom your heart is beating for, they may even be able to help you on that question. Now after this left turn here, please look to your left up on the wall. There's some interesting paintings, so-called sgraffiti, not to be mixed up with graffiti. It's sgraffiti. It's a special form of painting. They put on 2 layers of color and then scratch out the pictures. And it's basically picturing all the famous names connected with the ETH. They count, I think in the meantime it's 14 Nobel Prizes, and the most famous names, maybe Konrad Röntgen, the discoverer of the X-rays, and Albert Einstein, obviously, who was not only a student here, he was also a teaching professor and one of the most famous scientists. So here you get at the wall, see all these important names. And Einstein wasn't only a great scientist, he was also a pretty wise guy, so he said things like, life is like riding a bicycle, you have to keep moving forward in order to stay balanced. Pretty trivial, but probably true. Was in family hands, and especially in the first half of last century, it was the in place for everybody and anybody who had a name in Zurich. Artists, authors, politicians, actors met here for lunch and dinner and meetings. And since it was in family hands, sometimes they would even accept a little drawing or painting from these young painters that were a little bit short on cash, in exchange for a meal, which in hindsight may have turned out to be the most expensive meals in the world, because they kept those paintings, and some of them are worth a couple $1,000 or francs, whatever, and 100 years back only paid for a little lunch. And it's actually quite an experience. So here on the left side you see the balcony and the grounds. Because they collected quite a number of pictures. It goes over 2 floors and it feels like dining in a museum. So if you have a chance, you may want to have a look inside, maybe even for dinner. It is not really cheap, but it is one of the most traditional restaurants in Zurich. And coming up here to the left is one of the biggest open spaces in Zurich, and then behind the trees, if you get a chance to peek through, you will see the big white building. That is the Opera House. And this open space, sometimes it's used for all sorts of local festivals, events, film festivals, circuses. And so far they have successfully defended it against any ideas of hotel chains to build a beautiful, huge hotel there. And on the right side, this is probably the most photographed perspective we have in all of Switzerland on any travel guide. And you probably see a photo of this on Google. You probably find trillions. If you want to make your own photo, go ahead now. First chance. We'll come by just in 5 minutes once more. So if you want to have your in. And here we have another one of these event locations, this little peninsula there in the river. This is now our Oktoberfest. In the summertime it's a simple beer garden, and in the wintertime also a site of a Christmas circus. And here we are coming to the Bürkliplatz. Make a right turn. after the right turn, we are facing there behind the trees the Zurich office of the Swiss National Bank. Legion doesn't go away, that there must be tons of gold here hidden under the parking place, but nobody has ever tried to dig it out. And then on the right side we come to something that is the women's swimming pool. This goes back over 100 years when the ladies were not allowed to swim in the public, so they set this up here. And it is still women's only. I keep feeling a little bit discriminated. And you can imagine that the offices here on the second, third floor on the left side in the summertime, they have certain distractions. They have, by the way, a completely new problem now. What do they do with people that do not define themselves exactly as male or female? Do they let them in? Don't they let them in? Who is the line? Well, I wish we wouldn't have any other problems. So here in the next corner on the right side we get the Tonhalle and Congress Hall, Congress House, Tonhalle, very nice concert hall. Just renovated a couple of years back. They were having years of discussions if they wanted to take it down completely, rebuild it or whatever. So eventually it was renovated. And Tonhalle, the concert hall, really has a very good acoustics, so international musicians like very much to come here for performances. And God bless you. And here on the right side, the Red Castle, and then coming up on the White Castle a little bit further down. Simple, well, initially apartment buildings, only a little bit more than 100 years old. And well, I don't know if you would get a building permit nowadays for this style, but 100 years back they were a little bit more flexible. So the owner just wanted to have this type of style and he got it. And we are turning in here along the lake where all the major insurances have their offices, Swiss Life, Swiss Re, Zurich Re, and looking at the construction going on. Apparently insurance business seems to be doing fine. They can afford to have rebuilt nice offices, and the site is very beautiful anyway. I guess having an office with the side of the lake isn't too bad. And I'm sure you know the difference between a Swiss life insurance company and an Italian life insurance company. Now the Swiss are really very, very good at statistics. They know pretty much exactly how many people are going to die next year. And the Italians also know that, but they also know their names and addresses. I just hope there are no Italians on board. So here on the left side, the little glass house is a nice collection of cactus plants and the likes. Nice place to warm up at this time of the year. It's always a little bit warmer there. And on the right side here is in this park, it's actually where Alfred Escher grew up in the 19th century. Well, when we have time, I'll come back to that story on the freeway. Here on the left side is the Landiwiese, a nice park along the lake. You could also go swimming here, and it's another one of these event locations where they have here sport events, theater festivals, and all types of things. And it always amazes me each time again how much construction they set up and how cleanly they take it all down after the event. So actually afterwards you don't notice anything ever took place there. But they do spend quite a lot of money and effort in constructing temporary buildings there. And they don't last as long as the supermarket in Zurich. Times of the Nazis, they had to get out of Germany, so they spent a couple of years in California, and eventually came back here to Zurich, and that's where he spent the last years of his life until 1955, and he's actually also buried here in Kirchberg. And this, especially this Miracle Mountain, may be interesting for you because it very nicely describes the setting in Davos. Davos you probably only know by this World Economic Forum of nowadays, whatever that is good for. But Davos was actually famous for the treatment of tuberculosis 150, 200 years back, before the invention of the antibiotica. The only treatment of tuberculosis was to come to some place with dry, clean and air, and that was given in Davos, which is something like 1,500 meters, 5,000 feet above sea level, surrounded by mountains, so they have very clean air. And the treatment then simply is just stay there and wait and hope the best that the body will take care of the problem. So the ones that couldn't walk, they would just roll them out in their beds out to the huge balconies, which you can still see when you visit Davos. And the other ones just spent the time there, and this was not a matter of days or weeks, but rather of weeks, months, or even years. And you can imagine that being locked up in a sanatorium for such a time does something to the psychology of people. And Thomas Mann, when he was visiting a relative there in Davos, caught this atmosphere very nicely and described it in this book, The Miracle Mountain. And here down, looking downhill, you get a very nice view of the chocolate factory, Lind and Springly. There was the chimney. And straight ahead to the mountains of Glarus. You can also appreciate here the kind of banana shape of the lake. So we cannot stop here, but if you want to make a nice photo here, this is probably the best bit. Okay, thanks Carsten for slowing down, so that was your chance to take a picture here. And talking about the chocolate factory, I always like to advise you, this is, don't necessarily get caught up in any of these chocolate trips. You do not get to see the production anyway, for regulations of hygienic reasons. What you do get to see is a huge outlet of chocolate. Now with kids, this may be fascinating, you may enjoy that. But for anything else, for all practical reasons, if you plan to take chocolate home with you, the bus, you may know by your own experience, nothing is more boring or disgusting than sitting on the bus and waiting for one or two latecomers. So it's not as a favor to Carsten or to myself, but rather as a simple courtesy to the rest of the group. By all means, try to make sure that we always arrive at the bus all together at the same time, and then have the time necessary or needed in the next stop. And last not least, please spare us any lengthy telephone calls. Rest assured that none of your neighbors is interested in your private phone conversations. So best yet is just turn it into flight modus for the day and enjoy the real life. So much for the bad news, and now let's enjoy the countryside. As I said, we are driving along the lake Zurich here to the other end of the lake, where we will visit the city of Roses. We can only make there something like 60, maybe 65 minutes, so it's only a very short stop, at least for the people that continue with me to the Heidedorf. And it's always the trade-off between walking around a little bit, maybe climbing up to the castle, or getting something to eat. My recommendation always is, and I do that myself, keep the better part of your appetite for a nice nice, relaxed, quiet dinner in the evening, and don't waste your time here while you try to visit, to do sightseeing with lots of eating. Well, always try to fill in a little bit of general information. You probably figured out in the meantime Switzerland is not really a very big country. Good drivers make it from east to west in 4, 5, 6 hours, and north to south in 4 to 5 hours. It all sums up to some 41,000 plus square kilometers. Funny enough, almost to the square meter the same size as the Netherlands. That may not help you too much, but for the people from the American continent, it's pretty exactly 10% the size of California. Or to give you another comparison, we could float Switzerland on Lake Michigan next to Chicago, and we would still have some 30-40 miles of water around the new island of Switzerland. For people from Asia or down under, the two islands, Sri Lanka and Tasmania, are actually very, very close to each other in size, and both of them are some 50% larger than Switzerland.